Hi guys, welcome back to OC Aviary. I'm Oliver, and in today's video we're going to be catching up from our video 6 weeks ago on the types of colour food that I use for my birds. This is a video that a lot of people have been interested to see the results in, because we've tried 3 different types of colour feeding. We've tried Caraphyll red in the water, Cantax in the water, and then red egg food. And the red egg food isn't Caraphyll or Cantax mixed in, it's the red based egg food, sort of the red biscuit that you'll see. So we've tried that over the past 6 weeks on different birds. We've had Caraphyll on the cock redpolls and the young redpolls, as well as the goldfinch mule, which is behind me. We've had Cantax in for the crossbills, the Siberian goldfinches and the Siberian bullfinches. And then finally, we've had the red egg food in for the red mosaic canaries. So what we're going to do today is look at the results before and after the molt, and we're going to compare how they've progressed throughout the molt, the differences, and overall give you my conclusion for what I've found this year has been the best egg food, the best colour feed. And it doesn't mean that the other ones aren't good, but it just means that what's worked best for me. So I think we better get into it. So those first birds that we're going to look at are going to be the redpolls. We're going to have a look at 2 normals, an Isabel, a cinnamon and a cobalt, and they're all over-year cock birds. And we're going to have a look at how the Caraphyll has enhanced their redness on their chest, and then we'll go towards the Cantax. So this is the first bird we're going to look at, and this, prior to the molt, looked like this. And this is I believe this is the bird which I bred last year, who is normal, split for cinnamon, agate, Isabel and pastel. As you can see, the red has come through on his chest. Now you can see that this is a buff bird because the red just isn't quite as bright as you're going to see it on some of the other birds. However, it's a lovely bird, and I must admit the shape and the size that this bird has put on over the molt, for it to become a flighted bird is immense. There's some good looking markings on the sides as well, but the fact that this bird is split for several mutations does make it quite a desirable bird for me when it looks next year, because we have some cobbiness, we have some good type, we've got some good markings, and obviously being split for quite a few mutations, it'd be nice to bring that into our mutations. So that is the effect of Caraphyll on this bird. It's got the rose redness, but it's not as bright in this buff cock normal redpoll. So the Caraphyll has had a different effect on this normal redpoll cock. As you can see, he's brighter on the head, brighter on the chest. Now, although I won't be showing this bird, and the reason being is he's technically got a few faults, such as that white flight and the white tail feathers, because he is a bit of an oddball bird that I bought in last year, we sadly didn't breed off. But he will be a bird that's staying, because I'm hoping he might have something different in him because he's got these white flights. But anyway, you can see that the red is a bit more obvious on him. I'd still say this is probably an intermediate rather than a yellow. But overall, that red colour is better, and it's got the cap as well that's come out a nice, sort of almost crimson colour, which is lovely. So that's the effect of the Caraphyll on this normal, and overall I'd say that's quite a nice bird. This next bird is a bird that I'd love to see the development of over the molt, as he's had the effect of the Caraphyll. This is an Isabel redpoll. Prior to the molt, he didn't have any of the red colour on him because he was a current year bird, so he just obviously not got that red. But now over the molt, as he's become a flighted bird, he's looking brilliant, and I'm really enjoying how how he looks. So again, I'd probably say this is an intermediate. I wouldn't say this is a yellow, but the red, the rosy colour is brilliant. You can see that that's also come up to the cheeks. Obviously the cap on top is looking good, and the chest is looking nice. But so that's an Isabel redpoll, some good type to it as well, some cobbiness, and it's a nice bird, so I'm quite pleased with that. So there you are, that's the effect of the Caraphyll on the Isabel, and it seems to have worked quite nicely. This cinnamon is a good example of where the Caraphyll hasn't had much of an effect. We know this is a cockbird as it's proven this year, and I think it's a good example of what a buff looks like, to be fair, because that red has really barely even taken on the chest. As you can see, there's just not an awful great load of colour there from the Caraphyll on this, and same for the cap of the bird. It's stayed red and yellow. So that's just with the cinnamon, and I must say, obviously ignoring the fault of the bird putting its head back like that, I'm not too sure why that is. It's actually never been show cage trained, as we had no shows last year, but that's the cinnamon, and that's where the Caraphyll hasn't had as good of an effect as it has on other birds. This here is a 4-year-old cobalt red pollcock, or is going into his 4th year. He's a 2018 bird. So the Caraphyll had quite an effect on him last year, however not so much this year. As you can see, he's just finishing the molt. He's a slight bit scraggy. He has got some of the redness on the chest and on the cap, but the cobalts anyway don't have the obvious redness as much as do other mutations such as the Isabel. But that's sort of the effect it's had. You know, not an awful lot. You do get some red, you do get linings of the chest feathers red, but overall not brilliant from the cobalts, but it's not really to be expected. Because of the darkness of colour, it doesn't tend to come out as good. So overall, the effect of the Caraphyll has been good. It's made itself obvious in most of the birds. However, I think the effect of between a buff and a yellow bird is seen quite well through how the Caraphyll has been brought out in those feathers, and to how good it's been. Now, do remember that with Caraphyll, obviously, is at different strengths. So I try and keep my strength consistent, and how I do it is about 1 gram per litre. Also, I use a little spoon for that, so I would have to try and get you the exact measurement. But that's been the overall effect of the Caraphyll this year. Overall, I'm pleased. I think it's done a good enough job for what I needed it to do. However, maybe in next year we give it a higher concentration, a higher strength, because maybe it will give that colour out more and we'll get a better response from it in the red pollcocks. So that's our Caraphyll. So let's look at the birds that have had Cantax and see how that's been working for them over the molt. This here is the Siberian goldfinch cock, obviously a normal bird. He is a 2019 bird as well, I believe. So the mask, the blaze has come through quite nicely. He is just finishing the molt, so just got to finish off. And bear in mind, he hasn't really been showcase trained, so he's doing remarkably well. The Cantax in this bird has had a good effect, because what it's done is enhanced the blaze, and I do like the blaze, whilst also not colouring up the golden wing bars, as you can see, which are obviously a prominent feature in a goldfinch. So that's how it's affected the goldfinch cock, and I think overall I am pleased with that, because the blaze, the mask, is looking good, it's looking solid. Just needs to finish the molt to get those last few quills through. But for the rest of it, the yellow on the wing bars is about perfect. They aren't orange, and that's exactly like how we like to see them. Now, this is where the Cantax has let itself down with the crossbills. This is a crossbill cock. He was bred in 2020, so he is now a flighted bird. But prior to the molt, it would have been classed as a current year. So the Caraphyll has made him orange more than anything else. You can see that the top of his head has got a bit more red than anything, so it has taken a better effect there. But overall, from how he used to be prior to the molt to now, he is definitely not improved. It has gone down from the use of the Cantax there, and that's nothing against the Cantax. Maybe we didn't use a high enough strength, but overall it's just not had the effect that I was hoping it would. So we've got an orange common crossbill here rather than the bright red that I was hoping we would see. So that's him. We will be keeping this bird next year for Mulesy hybrids of some sort. But now let's have a look at a hen and see how the Cantax has taken effect to those. So in the crossbill hens is probably where I've been most let down by the Cantax, and obviously we can blame that on myself. Maybe it's varied in concentration. Perhaps the birds have drank more out of the bathwater when I've filled that up, and that's why. But overall, you can see that it's had an effect in making the bird darker and an overall sort of red. But when you zoom in closer, we've got a mix of red and green feathers, which is a shame really, because it would be nice to see obviously the nice browny red colour which crossbill hens can go. And obviously we had this when we first brought this bird in nearly 2 years ago. So just looking at those feathers, you can see some are red/orange and some are green/yellow. So it's a real shame that we have not got as good a colour out of her with the Cantax as we possibly could have done. But oh well, I guess it happens, and that's something that we can learn for next year, is perhaps a higher strength. But maybe Cantax isn't the right thing for crossbills, and maybe a high concentration of Caraphyll may be better, as I believe it does take quite a bit of effort to get crossbills into a good colour like in the red. So in the Siberian bullfinches, you can see I have moved them to a cage since, but we've had those on the Cantax as well. It's just not had as good as an effect. I've seen that for the cockbird, obviously it doesn't really matter or affect the hen, but for the cockbird it's just not got as red as he previously was. And this is most definitely a buff bird, by the way, this cockbird. However, last year, after giving him a dose of the Caraphyll and giving him on Caraphyll throughout the molt, he had a much richer red for a buff bird than he does now with the Cantax, which is a shame. So it's a bit of a tough one to call. Overall, I do think that the Cantax has just not been as good as I would have hoped, and not had as much of an effect as possible. And just to let you know, the reason we haven't got the bullies, or the cock bully at least, in the show cage is because he is finishing the molt, and I just don't want to stress him out. You know, unneeded stress. So there you are. So my overall thoughts on the Cantax is that it's just not been as good as Caraphyll, especially when we look and compare the birds when they was on Caraphyll last molt, and how they came out from that to how they've come out with with Cantax. I just don't feel that the Cantax is given enough. And what I have done is given them the recommended dose for Cantax, which is 1 scoop per litre in the Cantax tub. So perhaps it's a case of giving them more Cantax. Maybe we work into the diet as well as an egg food, or perhaps we give them a sort of a double shot of it rather than a single. But we have got to take into account then the effects on the liver of the birds, and we don't want that to cause problems, because if we go putting too much through, it could shorten their life. So I'm overall thinking Cantax is probably not the best way to go for the natives from what I've seen this year. So I will give it another go, don't get me wrong. We'll try it again next year, and maybe it has a different effect if we try it in a different sort of way of giving it to them, such as in the egg food, or maybe we do a double shot like I said before, and we just see how they come out there. So overall, I think from what I've seen, it's going to be the Caraphyll is winning at the moment. So now let's go and look at the red dimorphics, and we'll see how they've come through the molt, overall almost anyway, with the use of red egg food. So this here is the red dimorphic hen. Now sadly we have actually lost the cockbird over the molt, I'd say it's a combination of age, because he was a 3-year-old bird or 4-year-old bird. So it's a shame that we lost him, but what we have got is the hen, who's a younger bird. So we colour fed these guys on the red egg food, as you can remember. I would say that not an awful lot has changed in terms of how well they're coloured up. Perhaps they could have done with a bit of something more stronger in the water, so the Caraphyll, or the Cantax possibly, because I can't see evidence of all of that red egg food going in and having effect. As you can see, that we have the very slightest of masks around the eye, and very faint as it is. As it goes for the colour on the wings, it's not a red, sadly. It's an orange. So overall, I'd say that the red egg food hasn't been successful with the results that we're seeing now. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't work, but I would say that perhaps giving the red egg food in combination with perhaps Cantax would give you a very similar sort of result as to the Caraphyll, as the Caraphyll definitely seems to have been the winner overall for what I've seen this year through colour feeding my birds throughout the molt. And maybe we try that next year, as a combination of red egg food and Cantax may equal a same or very similar result to the Caraphyll. So my overall conclusion for what we've found over the past 6 weeks, as we've malted the birds with the enhancement of the redness through Caraphyll, Cantax and red egg food, has been that the Caraphyll has been the most successful through what we've seen with the red pollcocks. It's had effect on all of the birds, and it's brought out that colour, especially on the cap, but on the chest as well, especially in some of the intermediate and yellow birds. We have seen a good effect with that. So then next up, I'd say the second place was actually the Cantax, because it has had effect with red in some birds, such as the goldfinch cock. Obviously we've seen that his blaze has stayed a good red, and that doesn't mean if we hadn't have colour fed him, it wouldn't have been red, but I have seen that in some captive goldfinches they almost get a more yellow to orange mask, and that's definitely most definitely a red mask in that goldfinch, but obviously not had as good an effect on the crossbills. So then we then have in third place, it is the red egg food for me, at least with what I've found this year, and that is just the dry mix. That's not enhanced with Caraphyll or Cantax. I don't know what makes that red, but it's a red based egg food that you can buy. So overall, I think it's been okay. And I think maybe the red egg food is something, like I said earlier, to use in combination with Cantax or to use in combination with Caraphyll, so you're getting the red in through both ways. And perhaps it would be ideal giving the red egg food to the birds when they're young, so the parents are feeding it into young birds to give them that colour almost as a base, rather than as the only colour feeding method. So for me anyway, in what I've seen from this year, the Caraphyll has definitely made itself known and made it my preference for what I'll be using overall next year. And I think it's worth definitely trying concentrations and differences. So I think overall increasing the concentrations would be more beneficial for the red pollcocks. Hopefully get a brighter red, for the crossbills and bullies a brighter red as well. So overall, that's my conclusion, is that the Caraphyll has won. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and you found the results useful, and maybe that's something you adopt next year. Maybe it's something you try next year yourself, and that's what works best for me. It doesn't mean that someone else uses Cantax and it works just as good, because it may perhaps do, but for me the Caraphyll has worked best this year. So thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more, smash the like button, hit subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next video.